Critical Role Campaign 3 is back. Back with a vengeance, baby, as Critical Role and the D&D god Brennan Lee Mulligan himself have once again teamed up for another Calamity miniseries, this time focusing on the downfall of the great magical flying city of Aeor at the hands of the gods of Exandria, and good god, is it fantastic. Hello everyone, I'm Finn. Welcome back to Finn Films. Join me today as we are discussing everything that happened in Critical Role Campaign 3 episode 100, the second episode of the Downfall miniseries, where Brennan has dropped some absolutely major plot twists on the downfall of Aeor. So for a quick recap in our story so far for the Downfall miniseries, Downfall takes place 100 years into the Calamity being the grand war between the gods, the betrayer gods, and their prime deity, Brethren. This war ultimately leaving 2/3 of the population of Exandria dead, and then sent the world into a kind of arcane dark age where much knowledge has been lost basically forever. At this point in our story, our gods have gone missing from the world of Exandria for a number of years, and unbeknownst to the many mortals of the world, the prime deities and the betrayer gods have actually made a truce, setting a plan in motion to deal with a more, let's say, existential threat, specifically the threat of the flying city of Aeor and their new god-killing weapon known as the Factorum Malleus. The gods in their plan deciding to take mortal form, living out full mortal lives in order to sneak past this divine repelling barrier that Aeor has developed and destroy this weapon from the inside. If we remember, our amazing cast of actors are actually playing the gods themselves in mortal form, specifically these gods as follow: Taliesin Jaffe as the Wild Mother, Laura Bailey as the Raven Queen, Abu Bakr of House of the Dragon fame playing Corellin the Archheart, Nick Vilvaney playing the Dawnfather, Ashley Johnson as Sarenrae, and finally Noshir as not a god, but a strange character known as the Emissary that is apparently extremely important and is a proxy for the god Arathis, the Lawbearer. Our god characters are joined on Aeor by their betrayer god brethren also in mortal form, specifically the betrayer gods Asmodeus, Lolth, Torog, and the final god I believe is Gruumsh. Our divine siblings here having a bit of a complicated relationship with one another, the betrayer gods wanting to destroy Aeor altogether, while the prime deities want to attempt to try to destroy the weapon while still saving the people on Aeor, though not all of them are in agreement on this. Episode begins as our god brethren here split up into 3 different teams with different jobs in order to dismantle this god-killing weapon. However, before they can leave this long-forgotten temple on Aeor that they have all met up at, the Dawnfather discovers something strange, an offering to the god, a prayer that has recently been left here, specifically a prayer to the Everlight, Ashley's character. Now, this is important for 2 main reasons. Number 1, the fact that there are still worshippers of the gods on Aeor is quite astounding, as Aeor at this time is a place that has apparently, or at least we've been led to believe, wholly rejected divinity and the divine, as they view themselves as the saviors, the last saviors of mortals, basically waging war against both prime deity and betrayer god alike, both divine and unholy. Number 2, the fact that the Everlight, Sarenrae, actually still has worshippers, as during the Calamity, Sarenrae would basically have almost all of their worshippers completely wiped out in attacks from Asmodeus and I believe Zahir. Basically, in the modern times of Critical Role post the Calamity, the Everlight being kind of relegated to somewhat of a lesser god, having lost a majority of their following. The gods believing that this worshipper, who we come to find out is a great female archmage named Previn, could actually be useful for their plan, set out to attempt to find them. The gods Asmodeus, the Everlight, and the Dawnfather making their way to a strange kind of hospital in the heart of Aeor proper. Here in this hospital, they find the child of said archmage, a young, sickly boy who is suffering from a strange disease known as the Wasting, a disease that is basically uncurable for the people of Aeor and likely will result in his death. However, the Everlight, in her mercy, as this archmage did pray to her to save her boy, decides to heal the young man, as she is very much a kind of symbol of light, of hope, and of faith. It is here, though, where Brennan makes a major plot reveal that has left the fan base completely divided in classic Critical Role fashion. Plot reveal being this, that this Archmage Brevin just so happens to be one of the Archmages that is actually working on the construction of the Factorum Malleus. However, it doesn't end there. Not only is this Archmage working on the Factorum Malleus, this god-killing weapon, but she also happens to be a part of a secret kind of sect on Aeor, a sect of people, a sect of Archmages and Wizards that still worship the gods, specifically the Prime deities. We have to remember that Aeor at this time is gone like full authoritarian state, full anti-god. They are full anti-divine in all aspects, and the worshipping of a god, especially by someone as important as an Archmage, could lead to their execution. So what this woman is doing is taking great risks, but here she has found herself in the presence of these gods in human form. Now, the reaction to this news by the gods is quite fascinating. We need to remember that the gods themselves are siblings in a kind of like Roman pantheon-esque type of a vibe. And we need to remember that at the beginning, they were not separated as they are now, where they are very much divided between what we could kind of think of as evil gods in the Betrayer gods and good gods in the Prime deities. However, we've slowly started to realize that things are much more gray than that, and it has been made clear that many of the Prime deities still have love for their Betrayer god brethren, and ultimately don't want to kill or destroy the Betrayer god brethren, many believing that they can still be saved and potentially brought to salvation. So hearing this news that this secret sect of mages on Aeor are converting the Factorum Malleus to only destroy the Betrayer gods, well, you would think that would be good news, but to some of these Prime deities, this is not good news at all, as they don't want any of the gods to die, whether they be Betrayer or Prime deities. We need to remember, again, that they are siblings, and it very much seems like this love for their siblings at this time, even though that they did betray them, will ultimately probably lead to the downfall of Aeor. Now, as I said, the fan base was extremely divided on this plot reveal. Many people in the fan base complaining that this was just way too convenient of a plot thread to find out in this episode. The fact that they happened to discover these prayers, they happened to go and pursue it, and the woman that was praying happened to be a worshiper of the Prime deity who also just happened to be working on the Factorum Malleus and happened to be belonging to a sect of people that worship these Prime deities and ultimately wanted to convert the machine to just kill the Betrayer gods. And yes, they're not wrong, it is extremely convenient, but personally, I don't see anything wrong with that. We need to remember that this is a 3-part miniseries. As much as I wish it would have been a 4 or a 5-part miniseries, it is a 3-part miniseries. As such, there needs to be kind of like plot points, corners that are cut in order to eventually get to the story that they're trying to tell. The eventual outcome of the fall of Aeor. The question is, how exactly will it fall? What will be the betrayal? What will be the plot catalyst that ultimately leads to its downfall, when it seems very obvious at this point in our story that the Prime deities definitely don't want to see the fall of Aeor completely. So yes, indeed, it is a convenient plot point that is meant to further along our story, but that being said, that does not necessarily make it bad. I mean, Brennan is the kind of king of running miniseries. All of Brennan's series, at least on Dropout, are relative miniseries when you compare them to the grand narratives of Critical Role. Because of this, stories need to be told rather quickly. Things need to move along. They don't really have time to dilly-dally, to get distracted with side plots. Sometimes there needs to be convenient plot threads to move the story along. And while yes, I can see how this might be annoying, especially to people who only watch Critical Role, unfortunately, it kind of is inevitable. There's really no way around this. And at the end of the day, we need to remember that this is their story, and even if you do disagree with it, ultimately, I think the narrative as a whole, no one's really going to remember the fact that there was this convenient plot thread here, and ultimately this is a major plot reveal. The fact that there are mages on Aeor who, one, still worship the gods, when we have been led to believe that they, Aeor as a whole has come to hate the gods, and two, the fact that they are actually trying, in their minds at least, to do some good, to actually, protect themselves, as this mage even acknowledges that for all of the time of that mortals have been alive on Exandria, for the thousands and thousands of years since the gods created them, the Prime deities have been protecting them. They are their protectors. But now, because of, the kind of hubris of mages at this time in this era, these mages in particular believe that it is time the mortals helped. They helped their Prime deity creators and even help save them and help protect them in their minds believing that it is the right thing to do to destroy the betrayer gods, when it has been made very apparent to us so far in Downfall that the relationship between the gods is much more complicated than it was first led out to believe. Them having this very much sibling-esque, familial-esque relationship with one another. There is very much still love there. How long that love will last, only time will tell. All in all, I thought that this set of scenes here was pretty great, especially this kind of dialogue scene between Asmodeus and Pelor the Dawnfather. I really love the way that Nick Mulvaney is playing Pelor. For the entire time in the series, Pelor in the Critical Role universe has been depicted as this kind of grand, powerful, divine being of justice. A being of justice, if we remember to the intro of EXU Calamity, that really doesn't give any shits, especially when it comes to Asmodeus, the betrayer god brethren. But here, the way that Nick is portraying him is as almost this kind of naive young man, which makes sense because Nick's character is literally 15 years old. This is a kind of naive, hopeful version of Pelor. In many ways, it reminds me of the split in the Christian faith of Jesus and God. Pelor, it's specifically in Nick's character, the young version, being this kind of Jesus-like character to the god itself being Pelor, this split between the two. Nick very much embodying this kind of young, naive, hopeful version of Pelor, a version that very much sees redemption in all living things. And personally, I just find it fascinating, and I found this specific scene between Pelor and Asmodeus in the hospital great, one of the best scenes of the entire episode. However, what I believe the best scene of the entire episode is the scene in the bar, as we find out that Corellin, the Archheart, played by Abu Bakr, amazing actor, by the way, has created a kind of sanctum of beauty, of free love here on Aeor. I absolutely loved this scene, this idea of this kind of bastion of free love here hidden on Aeor in this kind of hidden speakeasy that Sunlaha, the mortal form of the Archheart, kind of has created here on Aeor, and we got some absolutely great scenes in this bar, specifically this dialogue scene between the Raven Queen and the Archheart. The Archheart wondering if it would be so bad if the gods themselves were to let themselves be destroyed. In his words, there is beauty in destruction. The god himself is tired. He has lived a millennia, and maybe he would wonder if it wouldn't be so bad if they were to just let themselves be destroyed. As in many ways, the gods have brought much good to Exandria, but they also have brought much horror, as at the end of the day, it is the mortals on the planet that are ultimately suffering between this war between the god brethren. Of course, the Raven Queen responds in kind of typical Raven Queen fashion that all death is inevitable, and if the god wants a death, then she can bring it to him, which is kind of a funny line here, also a reference to the fact that the Raven Queen was once a mortal mage of Avalere who ultimately struck down the god of death and claimed his throne. The fact that the Raven Queen, in comparison to the other divine brethren, is extremely young in terms of god age. They've only been a god for a very short amount of time, several hundred years, in comparison to the other gods who've lived, thousands and thousands of years. Who know how long at this point. However, that's not the only important thing that happens here in this bar. In the bar, they discover a planetar, an angelic-like celestial being. If we remember back in episode 1, Asmodeus informed the party that there was a celestial being that had been sighted in Aeor, something that would be extremely strange, as these beings aren't really accepted. If anything, they are used and dominated by the wizards of Aeor and used to power their kind of arcane machines. Asmodeus wondering if they have been betrayed, if possibly there has been a rebellion in these angels' ranks, and maybe they aren't too happy with what is going on and the decisions being made by their god creators. The Archheart and the Raven Queen managed to capture this planetar, this angel, this being of Pelor, and ultimately question it. Here's another fantastic dialogue scene. We get some really interesting information that, yes, indeed, there is a bit of an angelic uprising, that these angels, these creations of Pelor, these celestial beings have been they don't really agree with the gods' plan. In the angel's words, what did you think would happen when word would spread throughout Celestials? I find you sickening. You made us to be good and to fight, to seal the betrayers. I have slain devils, thinking it was right, and now I have been told to sheathe my sword. This is a war for us, but to you, To them, the gods, it is only a squabble. If you wanted to make us to serve the gods, then you shouldn't have made us good, as suddenly the Planetar cuts its own throat. Now, this is extremely interesting. It does seem like we have a bit of an angelic revolt under the creations, the Celestials of Pelor. However, there was one line in particular that caught my ear, as along with a lot of the fan base, specifically the "I find you sickening" line. To me, this very much kind of echoes the sentiments of Asmodeus, and it very much does seem like these angelic celestial beings are being influenced by Asmodeus, that Asmodeus is kind of pulling some strings behind the scenes here. Asmodeus, the Lord of Lies, to me very much seems like he is manipulating these celestial beings into betraying their prime deity creators. For what end, I'm not exactly sure. We do know that Asmodeus obviously ultimately wants the destruction of mortals, the downfall of Aeor, and moreover, the destruction and reset of mortals in Exandria altogether. As if we remember, the ultimate original split between the prime deities and the betrayer gods was in the role of the mortals. The betrayer gods believing that the mortals should not have been granted divine and arcane power, and ultimately he kind of is right in a way, as this arcane divine power ultimately did lead to the death of one of their siblings when the Raven Queen used this power to dethrone and kill a god and take its place. This is very much like a central theme that I've harped on in many of my Critical Role videos, specifically for Campaign 3, this kind of thread between mortals and divine is extremely thin, especially at this time during the age of Arcanum when magic is at its highest height, and the Raven Queen very much is an embodiment of this thread between creator and creation, and this idea that the divine are all powerful being extremely thin. The fact that one of the mages was able to rise up and ultimately strike down a god and take their place, the fact that the creator, the created, I should say, has now become the creator, is quite fascinating in this kind of grand story narrative of Campaign 3. From here, our story kind of enters into its climax. We get some battle scenes, ultimately the plan setting off into motion, and the gods destroying this divine engine that ultimately prevents the gods from interacting with Aeor, as it now seems like this plan, this downfall plan to destroy the Factorum Malleus, the god-killing weapon, is in full swing, but we know that things aren't going to go according to plan. Ultimately, at the end of the day, we know that Aeor does crash down to the ground, and ultimately most of the Aeorians are destroyed. We need to remember that what we are watching here in the Downfall miniseries is a vision, a recorded history of all of those on Aeor that Ludinus is showing our party of Bell's Hells. And we know that Ludinus is doing this for a specific reason. Ludinus is trying to show Bell's Hells his reasoning for wanting to destroy the gods by releasing Predathos, as Ludinus was a survivor of Aeor. He was a young boy on Aeor, and he saw, in his opinion, and with his kind of background, it makes sense why he would want to destroy the gods, as the gods in his world have ultimately led to great destruction of humans, of mortals, specifically his civilization. The real question is what ultimately leads to this destruction of Aeor? What goes wrong in this plan? Who betrays who that ultimately leads to the downfall, destruction of Aeor? It very much seems to me that the betrayer gods will do a classic betrayer god and will betray their prime deity brethren. We've already seen this kind of theme being played out. The fact that the Dawnfather and many of the other prime deities believe that the betrayer gods are still able to be saved, that there is still salvation there for them, that they can still find this, this arcane, this divine brethren that they once had, and they could all be happy together as a family. However, we know that the damage is too far gone, that many of these betrayer gods, specifically Asmodeus, are beyond redemption, and ultimately they will betray their prime deity brethren, and even would lead to their destruction if they could get their way in the ultimate destruction of all mortal kind. Of course, to be fair to the betrayer gods, as we learned in EXU Calamity, they're much more complicated than we've given them credit for. This morality in Critical Role is not as black and white as we were once led to believe. It's not as easy as betrayer god evil, prime deity good. On the surface, it seems like that, but the betrayer gods, like Ludinus himself, when you look at it from their point of view, their motivations do make a lot of sense. If we remember back to EXU Calamity, that was kind of the story of EXU Calamity, this kind of manipulation by Asmodeus, and the revealing of the betrayer god's motives. If we remember back to the opening scene of EXU Calamity Episode 1, Asmodeus asks Xerxes, think, whom did we betray?
Our promises were to the primordials, and we were called betrayers!
You have a poison in your mind, and the fact that you can't see it makes me so sad.
Overall, I'm absolutely loving the Downfall miniseries. I think it's absolutely fantastic. Me personally, I'm a massive fan of kind of like this deep lore and Critical Role, as well as a fan of just great improv roleplay and storytelling. And that's really what Downfall has been all about, really exploring these kind of relationships between the gods, Prime Deity and Betrayer, us getting kind of access to bigger lore, kind of old past lore and deep lore and knowledge on the creation of Exandria and the origins of the gods and their relationships with one another. The Calamity, in my opinion, is probably the most fascinating time in all of Critical Role lore. And I really hope that they continue to do Calamity miniseries, as there's so many stories that could be explored within the Calamity in the future. So I really hope that they continue to do these kind of Calamity miniseries moving on in the future. Obviously, a lot of people are currently comparing Downfall to EXU Calamity, people saying that Downfall is not as good as EXU Calamity. And yes, I don't think that Downfall is as good so far as EXU Calamity, but honestly, I think that's just because EXU Calamity was so goddamn good. I mean, that opening scene, that opening first like 20-30 minutes in EXU Calamity is just absolutely jaw-dropping amazing. The story overall as a whole is fantastic, and I do think that Downfall is extremely good. It's still really good. EXU Calamity is just like top tier, easily the best content Critical Role has ever made, so it's kind of hard to compare the two. Ultimately, they are two different stories, two different themes being explored here. Just they happen to be linked that, you know, Brennan is DMing both of them and they are exploring different stories in the Calamity, but I don't think it's really fair to compare one to the other. I think that does a disservice to Downfall, which I think is amazing. I think it's undeniable how good the roleplay in Downfall and the storytelling has been, specifically the performances from all of our actor guests characters here. Overall, I'm absolutely loving Downfall as a miniseries. I think that there's so many awesome good moments of roleplay and storytelling here, specifically in this exploration between the kind of relationship between the characters of the gods, these little interactions they have with one another, like Asmodeus and the Dawnfather, the Raven Queen, and the Archheart. There's just so many of these little moments that I think are just like absolute roleplay storytelling gems, and I'm absolutely loving it. I've talked about this many times in other Critical Role videos, but the Critical Role fanbase, as amazing as it is, does have a section of the fanbase that is, I think, overly critical. There's nothing wrong with criticizing Critical Role. There's nothing wrong with finding flaws in Downfall, but a lot of people are like completely doomer. I saw some posts of people saying that like Brennan has fallen off, which I think is like hilarious. That is an absolute joke. I just think that this is a different story that they're telling. We can't always expect for like everything to always get exponentially better. That's just not how it works. I think that Downfall is amazing. I think EXU Calamity is amazing, and I think that they are amazing in different ways. I don't think that that makes one worse or better than the other, even though EXU Calamity is probably better, but that doesn't mean that Downfall is bad. And it's hard to judge this series as a whole when we haven't even seen the whole series yet. There's still a whole nother episode to go, an episode that's going to be extremely long, and an episode that's going to be filled with epic moments, plot reveals, and betrayals of all sorts, and I can't wait for it. I'm extremely hyped. This is the most hyped I've been for Critical Role in a long time. As good as Campaign 3 has been, Campaign 3 has been long. It's lasted many years and has been full of highs and lows, and I think that this is a big kind of moment for Critical Role Campaign 3 and a big kind of galvanization period for the Critical Role fan base as a whole. And I really do look forward to episode 3 of Downfall and the many major plot reveals and crazy moments that I'm sure that we are in store for. In my opinion, there's no better D&D campaign to watch than watching the D&D DM god Brennan Lee Mulligan getting to play around in the epic, amazing, really fleshed out world of Exandria that Matt Mercer has created. This two combining of the minds, these two of these greatest dungeon masters of all time, combining together to tell a story with an absolutely fantastic cast. I think that a lot of people can just be overly critical at times when we need to sit back and think and watch and just be like, wow, man, what I'm watching is like Just absolutely amazing storytelling at its finest, and I think a lot of people get a little lost in the sauce in some of their opinions, especially in the Critical Role fan base. As always though, guys, with these videos, these are just my thoughts and opinions, and this video has gone on long enough. I've rambled long enough, so if you disagree with me or agree with me, let me know in the comment section down below. If you did enjoy this video, then why don't you make sure you like, comment, and subscribe, as that is the easiest way to help support me and put this video into the algorithm. If you did enjoy this video, then why don't you check out some of my other Critical Role and Dungeons & Dragons content on screen now, like the story of the downfall of Orcadum in one of the most shocking D&D horror stories I've ever seen in my life. As always, guys, thank you so much for watching. I hope to see you in the next one. Drink your water, hug your mother. Till next time, peace, love, adieu.